Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Harder Not Smarter podcast. Today, our guest is Michelle MACE Curran. Curran. I have to ask. Curran. She is a former Air Force Thunderbirds pilot. For those of you, if you've been living under a rock, don't know, the Air Force Thunderbirds are the Blue Angels equivalent, the demonstration show. She was the second female to be the lead solo, so the two that go off and do the cool stuff, super fast enclosures with each other, but just a very talented individual. They are extremely picky with who they bring into these squadrons. So the fact that you made it in at all is incredible. And then also being the second lead female is absolutely inspiring. So Michelle MACE, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
Yeah. And so you talk a lot about on LinkedIn, your imposter syndrome, the fact that you were super shy and almost reclusive as a kid growing up, and now you're a public speaker talking about your experiences as an F-16 pilot, as a Thunderbird, and now you're giving talks to huge crowds about these experiences. How did you get into a comfort zone where you're like, I feel comfortable talking about this topic now. I feel like I have enough experience to where I can share and hopefully make other people's lives better?
I love that you just started off with that question. I feel like there's so much background I have to go into to answer it. But I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I grew up in a small town, 4,000 people in northern Wisconsin, and not in a military or an aviation family. And I was an adventurous and driven kid. I was a straight A student. I loved roller coasters, doing outdoor stuff with my dad. But I was super shy. I would say like social anxiety level shy. And I just avoided my peers. I hated being put on the spot. Even getting called out in class was mortifying to me. And people have a hard time reconciling that with what I'm doing now. But it was quite the evolution, and it took a long time. It definitely just didn't happen overnight. And, going into the military, you're constantly forced to do things that are uncomfortable. And as I went through training, set this big goal of becoming a fighter pilot, got there, went off to my first combat squadron. Throughout those different steps of training and moving into an operational unit, as like this high achieving kid whose identity was wrapped up in those achievements, it began to get more and more challenging because the standard of the people around you goes up. As you guys know, as you move through each level of training, you might be the top at the basic level. I was, in pilot training, I was one of the top people in my class, got an F-16. Then I go to F-16 training. People around me are better. Now I'm just middle of the pack. I get to my first combat unit. Now I'm just one of a couple of people that are new. Everyone else is way more experienced, so they're all better than I am. And so I did struggle with that imposter syndrome and that self-doubt for quite a few years during that early period of my career, and trying to find my identity there, trying to find my identity as a woman in that environment. All of that is just woven together. I can't talk about one without the other. And then I eventually went through a time frame that I think a lot of people do in their career, where they gain some experience and they start to get confidence just because they're demonstrating to themselves that they're competent in their actual skill. And so that naturally starts to happen. But I also kind of just made this decision that I was going to push myself to do things that I wanted to do that felt uncomfortable. And I tell you all of that before I answer the question about speaking, because I got to the Thunderbirds. Obviously, we fast forwarded through a bunch of stuff here, but I get to the Thunderbirds. One of the first things that you do there in training is public affairs media training, because you're
Really?
a public figure. You're on the news every week. Every show set you go to, you land, canopy comes up, you climb down the ladder, and there's a reporter from a local news station there with a camera and a microphone asking you about the air show from the weekend. Or you're going to a high school and you're talking on stage. Or I even did some national level media stuff, and it's stressful. And so they want to make sure you're going to put a good face forward for the military and for the Air Force, and not just stick your foot in your mouth immediately when the camera turns on. So that initial training, meanwhile, I'm learning to fly in just this crazy, dangerous environment, which in itself was stressful. But I would say that public affairs canned media training, where I don't even know if the camera was turned on. It was like a 2-stripe airman who was just put with the task of like, hey, ask these Thunderbird pilots questions, so they can get used to talking on camera.
Sounds like the interrogation phase of SEER school. They've had the camera on you.
That's literally what I was thinking. I was like, this sounds like
trying to draw the information out.
The light was not as bright as it was at SEER, and the food was better. But I was so nervous for that. I remember there were like 3 of us going through it, and I was the 3rd person to go. I remember just like getting all the physiological reactions of stress, like dry mouth and sweaty hands. And I'm literally, this footage is going nowhere. Like, this is just for us to try to learn how to do this. And then you fast forward 3 years later, and I'm doing interviews every single week. I'm actually enjoying them. I'm able to joke around, and do like impromptu things on camera. It feels very comfortable.
Doing the Ricky Bobby, like, what do I do with my hands?
Yeah, you figure out like not to be a T-Rex or not to like rock back and forth. And so it just got more and more comfortable. And then as I step into being a speaker, my first paid speech was for a high school. It was actually for a private boys' school in Dallas. These high school boys just think I'm cool because I have cool jet videos. They do not care what I say. Like, the bar is very low. And I was so nervous beforehand. And now I've spoken to, audiences of thousands of people, corporations, audiences that are extremely accomplished in the business world, which is not my forte. I've spoken in foreign countries, and it feels pretty comfortable. And I tell that long answer because I think it's just such a good example of how much we can grow and evolve over time. That's 3 years between that first interview of being terrified of this airman, that in an interview that means nothing, to speaking on stages and getting paid a decent amount of money to do it. And it was just the repetition of doing that uncomfortable thing and getting better at it. So, long answer.
How much of that was just exposure and being put in front of these stages versus like training and like actually like taking time to get better? Because I imagine you're flying probably like crazy and practicing all the time there. Like, how much time do you have to actually like get better at public speaking?
So while I was on the team, it was just pure exposure because there was no priority put on getting better at speaking in general. We weren't doing courses on it. We weren't having lectures on it. We weren't practicing it other than when it was actually happening. When I started to do it as a business, I was like, if I'm going to ask people to pay me to do this, I better be as good as I possibly can at it. So right away, I went into an 8-month long course, did a bunch of in-person stage performance coaching, practiced a ton more, rehearsed. It was very scripted, went through everything from when I will move on stage and where I will look and voice inflection and all those things to get to where I am now, which I think is a pretty good speech. And on the Thunderbirds, it was much more just Q&A, casual, on camera. It wasn't as planned. So I think some of both.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you felt so nervous by the time you got to the Thunderbirds because you'd already been flying for 6 years or so at that point.
Correct? Yeah, I'd done 3 years of training and then 6 years of operational squadrons at that point. So we're coming up on a decade since I had started flying.
And I've heard pilots briefing, like the pre-flight briefs and the post-flight briefs that you guys go through are so in-depth. I know within the SEAL teams, I'm sure the Green Berets were just as rigorous in terms of our mission planning and briefing. But then when the flight crew comes in, they just blow us out of the water. You guys are so smooth and organized and very specific in how you brief everything, because you talk through every single detail. Like, for us, we're like 70% plan's good enough. The rest of it will buff out. And you guys are like, how do you operate like this? You guys are, down to the 30s, especially working with the 160th and stuff. Their motto is literally anywhere in the world plus or minus 30 seconds. Like, they're the epitome of precision. So the fact that you still felt nervous by the time you got to the Thunderbirds is, I think, it's also indicative of when you're surrounded by just very accomplished, high achieving individuals, you feel like everyone's that way. And if you're not up to the top of the group, then you're like, oh, I'm just not as good as everybody else, but you're just surrounded by perfection, that all of a sudden when you're out in the normal world, you're like, oh, actually, I'm pretty good at this now.
Yeah, I think it's all relative, and our perspective impacts that feeling so much. And after 6 years in combat squadrons and deployment to Afghanistan, I felt pretty comfortable in that area. But then you go to the Thunderbirds and the flying is just so different. Like in a gray squadron, we are not taking an F-16 and just flipping upside down and holding it, because you have your snacks and your pee packs and your water bottle and all your maps. Like everything would just fall into the canopy and it would be a disaster. Like you're just not doing that. But that was every single flight on the Thunderbird. I'm not flying 150 feet off the ground, pulling 9 Gs in a combat operational squadron. There's no reason to do that, right? Most things are happening above 20,000 feet. Most things are happening beyond visual range. We're not rolling up, pulling high Gs, rolling upside down. We're definitely not doing a head-on pass with another aircraft at 500 miles an hour. We're not flying 18 inches to 3 feet apart from 5 other jets. Like, there's just no reason to do that. And so it was kind of this, I don't know, it was just this reality check of I have to be a beginner again. Even though I'm accomplished, I'm an instructor pilot, I have to completely adopt this beginner's mindset and just accept that I'm going to suck at this for quite some time. And that's challenging because most of us hadn't felt like that in quite a while. And then you add on the public pressure of that role, right? Like the public scrutiny, and you have the actual scrutiny of like internet trolls who are just like waiting to see,
waiting
and
to
then
pounce on any little thing you do.
Oh, for sure. Especially as the only female pilot, you have a spotlight on you. It's just inevitable, which allows you to do a lot of amazing things and inspire a lot of people. But there's a downside to that. You also have a group of people who are waiting to criticize you. And then you also have the pressure of being a role model. And I compare it to being like a princess at Disney World. You cannot have a bad day. Like when you're interacting with crowds, you're doing 70 plus air shows in a season, and every one of those air shows, that kid that you're interacting with, it might be the only time they have that interaction in their life, and you need to make it special and positive for them, even though you've had that same conversation 100 times at that point, and you're tired and you have to pee and you're sunburned and you just flew for 45 minutes and worked your butt off. And so there's this big pressure to be on all the time. And, being more reserved and introverted, I actually struggled with that part of the job quite a bit over the flying portion of it as I got into the role.
And how did you manage that mindset shift? Where I'm sure they talked to you about this, the guys that have been on the squadron for a while, that they're probably like, hey, these are the things that you have to think about. Coming to the squadron, acting like a beginner, you're going to have to be a role model, especially for you. You're a 2X role model. You have kids that want to be pilots, and then you have little girls, regardless of whether they want to be pilots, but they see a female in a very cool job that may or may not seem like a reality to them. And so you have this new celebrity status that you're on a pedestal. How are you managing these things? Are they talking with you through these things, or is this just you figuring it out on your own?
I think the flying part was talked through. All the people that were on their second year with the Thunderbirds were our instructors. And so they would talk about, I really struggled with this as I learned this maneuver. Like, you're going to overpull, you're going to overturn, you're going to fall out of formation here. And that's exactly what happened. So them just being honest with like, hey, I've been in that exact same situation, and look, I can fly the air show now, like you'll get there, was really helpful. As far as the public stuff, we got like our formal public affairs training, and they would talk about it a little bit, but there hadn't been a female pilot on the team in 5 years before me. So all of the knowledge of what that experience was like was gone. And I don't think they realized the additional attention that I would get. And I don't think I did either, honestly. I knew I'd be able to connect with girls, but I would get stuck we would do PR events, and they would be like, oh, time to go. They would give like the signal, like, hey, everyone, you can leave. And I like couldn't leave because there was just like people, and they can't just be like, peace out. You have to gracefully try to exit those conversations. And as soon as you would exit one, you'd turn to walk towards the parking lot, someone else would stop you. And so they like, whoever I rode there with would be, I would see them out at the car being like, where's Mace? What is going on? And I would just be trapped. And that would happen every week. And I don't think they realized that was going to be a thing. And so we came up, with strategies, kind of like wingman at a bar type strategy where they would come up and be like, oh, boss needs to talk to you or whatever and to help me get out of there. But that was all just figuring it out as I went and learning where I could draw boundaries and learning when my energy would start to run low, what I should do rather than start to get short with people. You know, like tell them I have to go to the bathroom and just go hide in the bathroom for a bit or do something to get out of there for a few minutes. And I never like to talk about it in a negative way because it was really an incredible role to be in, but it comes with a lot of extra pressure.
Oh, for sure. Being that engaged mentally and having conversations, it's draining.
Yeah, for sure.
So I assume that you didn't like realize that this was going to be like, or maybe you like didn't know fully what to expect when you went into this role. When did you decide that you wanted to become a Thunderbird? And then how does that whole process work?
Or even an F-16 pilot before that, because you said you didn't come from a military or flying family.
Yeah, I'll give you all the answers. So in high school, I needed a way to pay for college. That's kind of what it boiled down to. I was a straight A student. Like I mentioned, my parents were very working class in a small town. They didn't have a college fund for me. My dad had gone to UW-Madison and just seen the ROTC cadets on campus, and he knew that a lot of them were on scholarships. So he suggested that I look into that. I pushed back a little bit at first, but long story short, I decided to apply for an Air Force ROTC scholarship, got one, and then I went to college as a criminal justice major because my whole goal was to do 4 years, probably doing special investigations, get out and apply to the FBI Academy. Like I wanted to be an FBI agent. That was the big plan. But halfway through college, we visited Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, and I saw 2 F-15s take off, like from the side of the runway, from the ramp, so very close, in full afterburner, at dusk. Sun is setting, orange flame coming out the back, jet noise vibrates your whole body. I mean, you guys know it's just an insane experience to see a fighter jet in full afterburner up close. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, forget this FBI thing. How do I go do that?
You can have that badge.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've spoken to some law enforcement organizations since I've become a speaker. And every time I tell that story, if they ask it during like a Q&A, they're all like, you made the right choice. Trust me. So it's always like a running joke. But deciding I want to do that and then actually making it happen were two very different things. Obviously, there was years of formal training and all competitive environments, and the odds were not in my favor. Got through that, went to the combat squadrons that I've mentioned. And while I was at the end of the last year of my first assignment, so I was in Japan, stationed in Misawa, I helped out the PACAF demo team as a safety observer, which is basically the single F-16 demonstration squadron. They go around the Pacific, like Malaysia, they go to Australia, Korea, Japan itself, and they do these air shows to connect just with the local populations. They also need to bring a spare aircraft with them just for maintenance reasons. So they would have a younger pilot fly that jet to these air shows. So I got recruited to do that, which was super cool because I got to travel to some really amazing locations. I would just fly the extra jet in, and then I just got to hang out for the weekend, essentially. Do some safety observer stuff on the radio with the demo pilot. But to the crowd, they did not know the difference between the guy flying the demo and me also landing an F-16 at the airfield and in a flight suit. And we did a show in Malaysia, and I got to go walk the crowd line, which is just something I'd never done before. And all of these women that I was interacting with were just like so mind blowing that I had just flown one of those jets in. Like some of them were crying, and they're like, I want to do that. That's so, because they didn't have any female fighter pilots. I don't know if they do now, but they didn't at the time. And same in Japan. And so I did a Japanese air show. Same thing. Like I don't need to say anything profound. Just seeing someone that looked like them doing something like that was just eye-opening and so inspiring for them. And it was so rewarding for me to see that I could have that impact. So that was just very small interactions, just a couple of trips. But I think that kind of planted the seed for me. Fast forward 3 years later, I'm wrapping up my next assignment in Texas. I happen to see an email come through that the Thunderbirds are hiring. And they hired every year, so I got these emails every year of my career. But for a while, I wasn't qualified because you need a certain level of flight hours and experience to even apply. But I also personally just didn't believe I was good enough to be part of the team. And as I struggled with that imposter syndrome, that self-doubt, that finding that footing in the community. But now 6 years in, I'm an instructor pilot. I've gotten to fly overseas as an instructor. I've gotten to deploy. I just feel a lot more comfortable and confident in that role. So I open the email and I read the requirements. I meet them all. And this wasn't it was from Air Force Personnel Center. I'm sure you guys got the equivalent. You would just like delete them because it was like, oh yeah. We need a special project officer in Germany. Or we need someone in Korea. So it's just like delete, like you don't even read them. This was from that same account and I read it. And I had apparently deleted the last few because it was not just like, hey, the Thunderbirds are hiring. It was, hey, applications close next Tuesday. Dum-dum, if you haven't gotten your application in yet and you're interested, like this is the last call. And this is my first time seeing it. So I read it, met the requirements, had that kind of excited feeling as I read it, like, oh, I could apply to this. I'm in a spot in my career where I feel like I could actually be competitive to do this. I actually believe in myself enough to just try. I meet the requirements, just with my life situation, everything, like it worked at that time. So I went to my boss that day and I was like, hey, sir. So I realized we've literally never talked about this in all the career planning we've done. But I saw this email and he was just a really amazing commander and we had a really great relationship. And he could have definitely been like, well, Mace, you kind of missed the boat on that one. You should have, planned for this. We should have brought this up weeks ago when it first opened. Instead, he was like, do you want to apply to the Thunderbirds? And I wasn't even 100% sure. I was still a little bit apprehensive. So I was like, I think so. And he was like, cool, what do I need to do to help you get the application in? And so
that's an awesome person to have.
Yeah, he was amazing. He jumped through hoops. I mean, to get a 40+ page application in that requires letters of recommendations from generals, all your records, all the things in like 5 business days was not a small feat. So the fact that he was, not just supportive and believed in me more than I did, I think, in that moment, but also was willing to help do the extra work to make it happen. Like, I'm so thankful for him for that because obviously it just changed, everything for me. I applied, got hired, and here we are.
What does that process look like for people that either are interested in, they're pilots and they're interested in going that route, or it's just something far beyond anything they ever considered, and they just have a curiosity of what goes on behind the scenes to become a demonstration team member?
Yeah, so it's that initial call for applications. You have to have, I think it was 750 hours in a fighter aircraft. It might be 1,000 now, but basically you've probably gone through, 5 to 6 years of operational experience to meet the minimums. And it could be in any fighter aircraft. It doesn't have to be an F-16. So you'll have F-15, F-22 pilots, F-35 pilots that all apply. Then they review those applications. They narrow it down to, I think when I applied, they narrowed it down to 12 people that were semifinalists for 3 spots. They brought 12 of us out to an air show with the current team so that they could get to know us and do some like formal interview stuff where we got asked questions, but also so we could really see what it was like to be in that job, because they want to make sure people know what they're getting themselves into. That's a whole lot more than just the flying. Did that whole weekend. Then they cut that down to 6 people, the finalists for those 3 spots. Maybe 6 weeks or 2 months went by, got brought back out to another air show weekend, did more interviews, and this one included the 12-person panel interview, which there's 12 officers on the Thunderbird team. And as an applicant, we'd call them appies. As an appy, you come in, you sit at the head of the table. All 12 are around this boardroom table, and they just rapid fire questions at you, and it's terrifying. So I went through that, ran that gauntlet, and then I would say a good portion of the interview is just them seeing if they could tolerate being on the road with you 240 days a year for 2 to 3 years.
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
Going on deployment and training cycles with some guys, you're just like, I cannot stand this person by the end of deployment.
Right. And I mean, those like minor personality conflicts, when you're putting that pressure cooker, can become a huge deal, and they can affect morale on the entire team. So it's kind of like this throw check to make sure that the dynamic will be good. And then as long as your flying meets the standards, your record looks good, you can interview well, and you don't say weird things where like you're going to get the Air Force in trouble if they put a camera in front of you. And you seem like you're motivated by good reasons and like true reasons to be part of the team. I think that's how they really narrow it down. And then it's kind of a complicated puzzle to figure out who they actually hire and what spots people go into. I think the general public has assumptions that either the team just picks you and throws you in a spot, or you like apply and you're like, hey, I want to be a solo pilot, or hey, I want to be a diamond pilot. And that's what happens. But being on the other side of it for 3 years and hiring new teams, it is everything from experience level in your airframe, because we're going to fly F-16s, the entire time they're on the Thunderbirds. We need people that come from an F-16 background to be represented in the team, because their depth of knowledge in the systems of the aircraft is going to be necessary when we're flying all over the world, or all over the country at least, every single year. And someone coming from an F-15 and going through a transition course for a month to get spun up to fly the F-16, they're going to know enough to fly the jet, but they're not going to know enough to troubleshoot maintenance things when they go wrong, or deal with avionics issues, or any of that. So it's like, okay, where's the depth of experience to keep the team safe in the F-16 specifically? And then personalities, they're like, okay, if this person gets hired as number 6, the opposing solo, then their second year on the team, they're going to move into a lead solo role, which works very closely with Thunderbird 1, the boss. Do we think those two personalities are going to work well together? So that will affect who they choose for that role. And then when you look at the diamond, which is numbers 1 through 4, they make the diamond shape when they're all flying together. You're like, okay, we're going to hire this person as the wingman, but their second year on the team, there's going to be a new commander, and they're going to be the instructor to teach that new commander how to do Thunderbird stuff. Like, do they have the personality for that? And
this
so
is
it
the depth
is
of planning I was talking about with the pilot community. Like,
yeah,
first we're like, yeah, we like him. Cool, let's bring him on.
Yeah, would you have a beer with him? Yes, I would. So he's on the team.
Yeah, because when the positions aren't interchangeable at all, like when you get hired as a solo pilot, you're going to stay as number 6, you're going to become number 5, the lead solo, the next year. If you're brought in as a wingman, you're going to stay in the diamond and become the diamond instructor the second year. And so when there's only 6 of you and it's always the same people in the same positions, flying 70 air shows a year, not to mention 100 practices, personality conflicts become a big deal. Because it's not like you can just move someone to another position to create some space between those two individuals. Like, you're working closely together, but you're also physically flying inches from one another at 500 miles an hour. Like, the trust has to be there. And so I think that's why so much effort is put into personalities and how they mesh.
Do you guys use any objective assessments, or is this like all like purely based off of your interactions?
It's all based on our interactions, other than there's now a flying tryout. When I tried out for the team, there wasn't. There had been back in the day, but they got rid of it at a certain point. I don't know why. But my boss that was with me for 3 years, he decided to bring it back, and the team still does it. So there's actually, they'll fly a D model, a 2-seat F-16. They'll put one of the current Thunderbirds in the back seat as the safety person to basically grab the controls and save them when they inevitably try to hit the other aircraft. And then the person in the front seat is just given these tapes to review in advance and all the parameters for the maneuver. And like, they're given everything they can get to really prepare ahead of time. But everyone is just terrible at first. And so that thing about being a beginner again, it's a good litmus test to see how they're going to handle that stress. Like how their egos are going to do in that environment, how much preparation they put in. Like, do they know the radio calls? Because we give them all that in advance. If they key the mic and they have no idea what they're supposed to say, they could have prepared and, been ready for that. So that is a good way to test a lot of things. But that's a newer addition back to the hiring process.
It's crazy how challenging radio conversations could be, like, both from the SEAL teams. They even have conversation about, you think what you're going to say, you push the button, and then you say what you're going to say. And I was working on my private pilot's license for a while, and the flying, a Cessna, it's not challenging. There's challenging scenarios, like if you have a cross breeze on the landing or something like that. But for the most part, flying's not super difficult. The hardest part of the pilot's license is learning all the radio calls and talking with the towers and transferring between towers and talking with other pilots and stuff like that. It's weird. As soon as you have to push a button, knowing that you're going to have to say something, and then when it comes to saying something, your brain just crickets. Like, what was I going to say?
Yeah. But don't feel bad. Everyone has that issue. Like, it's like you think about it and then you stress yourself out, and then you're like, all right, mic on, brain off, and you'll just be like, blah, 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 blah. And then you'll just hold the button down and just have hot mic, just breathing because you can't think of what you're supposed to say. And everyone that's on that frequency is just like, I just want a taxi. Can you get off the air so I can talk? Like, bro.
It's like your server telling you to enjoy your meal, and then you're like, oh yeah, you too.
You too.
Damn it.
Yeah. God, or if you're on the phone with a coworker and you're like, okay, see you later, love you. Oh wait. It's weird.
Awkward. Yeah, the worst though is when the Prick 19s, the radios we use, they can have a setting on it where it will actually play back in your ear what you're saying, but for some reason there'd be like a half-second delay. So as you're talking, you're hearing yourself a half-second ago. That would confuse the hell out of me. I was trying to find my radio guy. I was like, how do I turn this off? I literally cannot talk right now because I'm hearing somebody talk to me, but it's myself. And it was driving me crazy. Actually, on these mic setups we have, you can have it where it plays back in, but at least I can have it in real time. Yeah. But yeah, that I don't understand how people operate like that.
That, I swear, just scrambles your brain. I've done a couple announcing things at air shows since I've been on the other side. And a lot of times when you're on the mic and there's these speakers, there will be a delay, but you can still hear it. And I'm almost just like, can I plug my ears while I talk? Because you start to like slow down your speech, and all of a sudden you're like, and from the left, the lead solo, and your brain just like short circuits. It's trippy. Yeah, do not make me listen to myself with a delay.
Yeah, it's terrible. How did you choose you wanted to be? I didn't realize it was like a selection thing of I want to be either in the diamond or the solo. What made you choose one route over the other?
Yeah, so you get to put your preference in, and then the team ultimately decides where you go. So
yeah,
you
cool. Thanks for applying.
Right, it might
we'll tell you where you should be.
And for all the reasons I mentioned, like they have a much bigger picture of things than you do as an applicant. But I did put solo as my first choice, and that's what I ended up getting. And the single aircraft stuff where you get to pull a lot of G's and you get to fly really fast, and you get to fly upside down, and you get to rocket from 100 feet to 15,000 feet. You just get to do this amazing stuff that the F-16 is capable of that you never really get to do at any other point in your career, and that looked fun. But also to not be just handcuffed to flying formation on another jet for 45 minutes straight. Like, just to be looking one direction that entire air show and be so focused on the wingtip of another jet for that amount of time sounded kind of terrible. So the solos, you get the best of both worlds. You get to do that for like 10, 12 minutes, but then the rest of the time you get to like rage around as a single jet at low altitude, and it's just really fun.
It's like getting a guitar solo. Like, let them loose.
Yeah, it's cool. No regrets on choosing that. That's for sure.
What's it like in the cockpit of a Thunderbird or being on the Thunderbird team, and like how like are you just like totally wasted at the end of a show?
At first, for sure, when you're new to the team, and then probably like your first half of your first season. Like we would start shows in like March, April timeframe, and I would say it took until like July or August to really feel comfortable. And then you add on the heat, and especially, we're based in Las Vegas, and we do a lot of shows in very humid locations in the summer as well. So when you're doing an air show like middle of summer in Orlando or in Houston or something, the jet has air conditioning, but it's this like one vent that's down between your knees, and it's only like 2 inches wide, and it just like, it's kind of like the vent on an airplane where it just like blasts air into your eyeball, but the rest of you is sweating. And then you have on a flame retardant flight suit, you have on a harness, you have on a G suit, and a helmet with a visor and a mask. So even if there's cool air blowing out of this tiny vent, it's just not touching your skin. And so it's so hot. Like the torture of just feeling like you're getting claustrophobic, because when you're in a hot enclosed space, how it feels like you can't even breathe. There's a lot of times in Thunderbird jets where it feels that way. It's the worst on the ground because the airflow is just not there. If you're flying at altitude, you're cruising cross country at 20,000 feet. The AC does catch up and it gets a comfortable temperature. You can actually make it cold in there. But when you're ranging around 100 feet to a couple thousand feet off the ground during an air show, you just don't get that. So it's very hot. When you're late in the show season, if you've been on the road for 7 months, the only day we would have off were Wednesdays. So that was like our one day off the week. We'd be flying, 6-7 times this high G demanding, high focused air show throughout the week. You're sleep deprived. You're constantly changing time zones. It's exhausting a good portion of the time. Not to say like when you're experienced and it's a beautiful day, it's not turbulent, it's somewhere you're familiar with flying, where you can have a flight where everything just feels easy. That does happen eventually, but the bulk of the time it's hard.
Yeah. I had Hazard Lee on he was one of my newsletter spotlights a while ago. He was pretty early on, and I was talking with him. He was mentioning how much just a small percentage in dehydration drastically affects your G-force tolerance. And with being a combat squadron, and especially with females, I've talked with several female pilots, especially before a lot of the modern technologies come out to help you guys pee while you're in the cockpit. Yeah. A lot of you guys would just dehydrate yourself because you didn't want to have to deal with peeing in a very tight coffin, basically. And he's like, it just taxes you if you have to pull any kind of G's and you're dehydrated. So imagine if you're doing these air shows in the middle of summer, going through hot places, it's a burden to keep enough fluids down while you're sweating through all your gear each day for 6 days a week.
For sure. And tactical dehydration just doesn't work in that environment because it's so high G and because you're so close to the ground. Like, it's just such a high repercussion environment. You can't play around with a potential gray out or G lock. Luckily the shows are short, so the bathroom thing wasn't an issue for the actual air shows generally. Definitely an issue for all the cross countries, which is where we would fly our own jets to wherever the air show was every single week. So you get very good at doing the magical air squat that is being a female pilot trying to pee in an F-16 cockpit.
Magical air squat.
People will ask me about it. I get asked sometimes, especially by like high school audiences on stage, like, how do you go to the bathroom? And I'm always happy to tell it because it's funny. Like, it's a huge stressor actually in the moment, but it's funny to tell now because it's just so ridiculous. Like, the Thunderbirds are put on this pedestal of being, sexy and glamorous and all. And you're doing all these interviews and like this public figure, and meanwhile you probably have suits. Very tight flight suits, which do not make it any easier to pee in the jet, right? Because you don't have any fat, like there's no excess fabric to move things around. You got what you got. And it's just a running joke among the pilots of like how many times you have a piddle pack mishap between home and the air show you were trying to get to. And you would like, especially for me, I had a much lower success rate than the guys, where you're like, oh, I thought I just went to the bathroom and this bag, and then you hold the bag up and the math isn't mathing. You're like, that is not enough. Where did the rest of it go? Because you can't see what you're doing. It's all just by feel, and you're like hoping for the best. Well, the rest of it like dumped into the back of your show suit. So now you're like a 30-something-year-old adult in this glamorous position, and you have pee pants. Like,
I was just sweating really hard.
Yeah, you're just sitting in a $30 million airplane in your own urine. And you're like, cool. This is exactly what everyone imagines this job is like. And then you land and a camera gets put in your face and you have to do an interview. And you're like, as long as I don't turn around, no one can tell.
Or you just pull a Billy Madison and you try convincing people that peeing your pants is cool.
Everyone should do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what? This is cool. I feel like we went down a rabbit hole, but
it happens on this.
It's a stressor. But yes, show. G tolerance is affected by hydration level. That was the original question.
I was like, where did we start?
So I'll get us back on track.
Yeah,
Kevin, I'm asking the questions here. Okay.
I'm off. The fun dynamic of having two hosts.
Yeah. So for most people that become Thunderbird pilots, like what is that? Like, where is that in their career? Like, what do most people end up doing afterwards? Is it like kind of like a ride off into the sunset type deal, or is it like they go back to their unit and fly again? 50-50.
Yep, so most people, there's always a shortage of 11Fs of fighter pilots, so the community is very eager to keep you in that community. So what happens for most of us, usually you get hired as, unless you're the commander of the whole squadron, usually you get hired as captain, and then you'll pin on major while you're at that assignment. And then most people end up going to school afterwards, the military version of a master's degree. They go do that for a year, non-flying. And then they'll generally go back into the jet that they initially came from. Or a lot of people right now are switching over to the F-35. And then they'll probably go be the director of operations for a combat squadron. So that's kind of the general flow. And I mean, a handful of us do get out at that point because you incur a 10-year commitment to the Air Force when you graduate pilot training, which is 2-ish years after you commissioned. So about the 12 to 13 year mark is your first chance to decide if you want to stay for, a whole other assignment or if you want to leave. It's the first time you have the opportunity to make that decision. And, every time there's a handful of people that decide to go to the reserves or go to the airlines or do something weird like what I'm doing. But most people will stay in, go to school, and then become a DO.
Okay.
And how did you make the decision? What was the cost benefit analysis going through your head?
Yeah, so several factors. And I think because I was so public facing, or I am, I guess still, people were kind of shocked that I was leaving. But it was really came down to 3 things. I had met my husband when I was brand new to the Thunderbirds. We got married during my first air show season. He has a son, so I now have a stepson. And they're very established in Las Vegas, which is, where the Thunderbirds are based. My stepson's mom is here. So just the idea of picking up and moving every 2 to 3 years became a lot less appealing. And just logistically trying to figure out how that would work with this blended family where we're not going to take him away from his mom, obviously.
Yeah.
My back was really beat up after pulling 9 Gs for so long. Flying the solo position for 3 years, especially the left solo, which is what I did, has the max G turn, which is a full 360, 8 to 9 Gs, 100 feet off the ground, doing that every single practice, every single air show, plus several other maneuvers where you were hitting 7 to 8 Gs every single time. That compression of 8 to 9 times the force of gravity on your spine really does a lot of damage over time. And most fighter pilots will struggle with neck and back issues, but mine just got accelerated so much with that role and doing it for so long. It's usually a 2-year assignment, but because of the pandemic, they asked us all to stay for 3 years. So, I had even longer exposure to that. And from the start of my first show season, after doing 4 months of flying up to 10 times a week, learning these maneuvers, pulling high Gs, I started to have just chronic back pain. And I, had done a nerve ablation, I had done a steroid injection, I was all the ibuprofen, all the lidocaine patches, and it was just affecting my life every single day. And I'm just like, it's not worth it at this point. Like, all of my hobbies and the things I love to do are all physically active. I don't want to be 45 years old and not able to do those. So that was a motivating factor. And then the last one is that I was just in this unique position with my role on the team where I became this role model, especially for women and girls. And I got to have these incredible interactions that for some of them were hugely impactful. I could see, in kids, little girls, this single interaction, like their eyes would light up and their view of what was possible for them in the world just got bigger. For young women who I would talk to about feeling like an imposter, about struggling with self-doubt, about being a shy kid, and they could find, themselves in that, they would go do all these cool things that they'd wanted to do that they didn't believe they were capable of. that became just incredibly rewarding for me. And I wanted to figure out how I could keep doing that. And I didn't see staying on active duty as a way to do it. And so it was kind of the combination of those three things, like this new passion, kind of this new purpose, my family situation, and then my body just being really beat up. I was like, I need to look at other options.
What is the on-staff support look like? I mean, with the military becoming very focused on almost treating, especially like within the pilot community, the special operations community, treating them like they're professional athletes in terms of, nutritionists and physical therapy and conditioning regimens and all that stuff. Nutrition probably huge for you guys where you're on the road. What does the support staff look like, and how much are you guys getting catered to versus just figuring it out on your own?
When I was on the team, we were 100% figuring it out on our own. We had a flight doc who is a family medicine doctor, but he was responsible for the whole 130-person Thunderbird unit. So he was primarily dealing with my kids up in the middle of the night with an ear infection. Oh, I twisted my ankle. My back hurts. Give me some ibuprofen. We had, at Nellis, the base here in Vegas, we have a big hospital. They have physical therapists. When my back pain was really bad, I missed a couple of air shows. And that was very visible, right? Because there's no spare pilots. So they flew a 5-ship demonstration instead of a 6. So everyone's like, where's the other jet? What's happening? So I was hoping that I didn't do that by choice, but I was hoping that would get some traction with us getting more support. One of the PTs at the hospital got assigned to come to our squadron on Tuesdays when we were home. We would fly back from an airshow location on Monday, fly a local practice on Tuesday. Wednesday was our day off, and then Thursday we would leave for the next one. So Tuesdays we should be working in the squadron. So that PT was assigned to come to our squadron from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. We could sign up for slots. I get the intention behind that, but seeing a random PT only on weeks we're home one day is not super helpful. And the hours that he was there exactly coincided with when we would be briefing, flying, and debriefing our practice. So as pilots, we could not see him because our schedule wouldn't allow. So it was great for our maintainers who also have their own physical issues with repetitive motion and stuff. Great for them, but it was not helpful. And I am now seeing a PT twice a week. I'm paying out of pocket because it's the guy I want to see. It doesn't align with insurance. It's not at the VA, whatever. But I'm willing to do that because I need to not be in pain every single day. And what we found actually helps my back pain is the exact opposite of what that PT that I sporadically saw while I was on active duty told me. Flexion versus not, whatever. I don't want to get into all that. But the things he told me to do for exercises actually make my back pain worse. But we were never able to develop a relationship enough for him to realize that. And we did not have athletic trainers. We did not have nutritionists. I would pack meal prep meals here from a local company in Vegas in a Yeti cooler, send them on the C-130 or the C-17 to the show location so that I would have healthy meals to eat. Maybe a third of the pilots did that. Everyone else was just gas station sandwiches, Applebee's, Chick-fil-A. And I was like, guys, our bodies are getting beat up. Our sleep is shitty because we're changing time zones every single week. And we're in a hotel. And can we just sign a petition for hotels to not have those flat ass feather pillows that have no
Oh, those are the worst.
No support.
The worst. What? Why is
they're literally the worst. They're not even pillows.
No, they're just flat pancakes and no comforters.
If there's anybody in the hotel industry listening to this right now, please just help us out.
Are you guys able to throw a pillow in your gear bags? Is there room in the F-16? You can just shove your Tempur-Pedic pillow in there.
If I was to go back now, I would have to do that, or I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning. But I had a lot of bougie stuff I brought in my suitcase.
I did hear from some F-15 pilots that they have, they're like the external fuel tank type things, but they're hollow and you can actually stuff pods, luggage and stuff like that in there.
Their jets just have more space.
You guys probably didn't have those.
No, because they're G limited, so we couldn't fly our demonstration with them. So we were clean aircraft, but we had a cargo aircraft that came with us. But there's also, 130 people on the team. And a lot of people's stuff has to fit on it. A spare engine has to fit on it. All the tools, all the parts. So you get your one
engine,
suitcase.
pillow.
Yeah, right. right? My mattress topper, that would have been nice. I feel like, again, I went off on a tangent, but no, we did not have the support. And it was actually like one of the things I was pissed off about it, because I was like being treated by the Air Force as this like golden child. Like, look, you're a public figure. Like, we're using you for recruiting. You're doing all this stuff. And my body's being super beat up by the profile, which I get comes with the territory. We're running the schedule of a professional athlete, but we don't have that support at all. I mean, that was a huge factor in me leaving. Like, if you want to retain people, you have to help their bodies cope with the stresses you're putting them through. It's gotten better. There's several fighter squadrons that now have support. The Thunderbirds now have access to an athletic trainer and a physical therapist. And I think their athletic trainer used to work with Cirque du Soleil. She used to work with like the Raider cheerleaders. So at least they're used to working with active people that are athletes, not just your 60-year-old who wants to like put their socks on. Because that level of care varies greatly, right? So anyway, you got me on a soapbox.
Oh, I mean, that's what we do best. I feel like there's a great business opportunity for anybody listening. And we have a lot of entrepreneurs on here to petition a government contract to be like the food service provider, like a high-end meal prep to send meals with the pilots wherever they go. Whether you put them on dry ice or have spots around the country where you can get those in quickly. I mean, government contracts are lucrative, and I mean,
there's some senior enlisted person that's like head is about to pop with you just saying all of this, Kevin. They're just like, no, MREs are fine. You will just eat the MREs. That'll be good enough.
Even just on base at home station, like there's this.
Oh, don't get Greg started with fast food on base.
Yeah, there's the BX and the fast food, and then there was this like ghetto taco truck that would pull up to our squadron a couple days a week and like blare its horn, and you could go order greasy food from it. I was like, but how is there no like meal prep grab and go type cooler? Because the Nellis gym is like one of the best in the Air Force. It's amazing. There's a ton of people that work out, so there's a demand for healthy food for sure. But everyone that wants that is either bringing it themselves or they're going to Subway and being like, can I just get extra ham on that and no mayo? Like, to have meal prep stuff accessible on most bases, I feel like there would be a draw for that.
That always drove me crazy. So on the SEAL base on Coronado, we had, I can't remember if it was McDonald's or Burger King. I think it was McDonald's, Panda Express, Subway. Were the options we had to go with. Like you're trying to create, you're spending millions of dollars on these guys to be tip of the spear, essentially athletes going forward. And outside of going to the galley for food, which is questionable at best anyway, you have only these fast food options. Like even something like Chipotle would be significantly better, because let's be honest, the meat and quality of the food at Subway, which is your supposed healthy option, is garbage.
No, it's terrible. It always blew my mind, and I know that they're trying to fix this. It's just slow. It blew my mind that so much money was invested in us, and we were asked to do things like go to Colombia for their Air Force's 100th anniversary to fly a show as, a political tool. We're asked to fly over the White House on the 4th of July, again, as a political tool. Like, we're asked to do all this stuff. There's only 6 pilots flying in the demo. Not that the whole team needed the support, not just the flyers, but that there was just this desert of support for things like physical fitness, mobility, pain management, nutrition, sleep. Like, none of that stuff was even talked about, other than like when we would look at ORM and we're like, oh, we're late in the season, everyone's probably tired, just stay alert out there, like go to bed earlier.
The CYA response.
Exactly. So there wasn't like an actual plan to help prepare us to operate at the level we needed to.
That's
frustrating.
Right. It was
super surprising too, because I mean, group and the SEAL teams, like, we're very well supported in like the physical fitness, PTs, nutrition. We have nutritionists even with us. Like, that's very surprising to hear that you guys didn't have that.
I think everyone thinks that the demo teams get a lot more resources than they do. We also had the oldest hangar on base, and so in the winter, the heat would always break. So it would be like 40 degrees in there and everyone would be wearing gloves to try to type on their computer. And in the summer, the air conditioning would always break. And so we actually put a thermometer in our where our office was, where we had all our desks, and it would regularly be in the 90s. And so you're like going and flying the demo when it's 110 outside and just sweating. And then you come back in the building just for some reprieve and you walk into your office and it's like 92 degrees in there. And you're like,
cool.
I don't want to sound like a diva, but can we just get like some temperature control and like something besides ibuprofen for this debilitating back pain?
It's probably just because you guys are such a small unit that people forget about you. Honestly, no one wants to be the person complaining to their higher up about, oh, we need better support and stuff like that. And so it's the squeaky wheel thing. If there's no one actually speaking up, everyone's like, all right, it's fine. Send the budget over here.
Yeah, and I think the Thunderbirds almost being this self-contained unit, like we had, normally in a fighter squadron, you have a maintenance group that's separate. And so you're like very intertwined with the base culture. The Thunderbirds, all of that is in the unit itself. And you're gone so much that the base kind of forgets about you as part of it, since you're just never there. And since you kind of run yourselves. So yeah, I think there's definitely part of that. I did at one point go over to the rescue squadron at Nellis on like the other side of the flight line to see, I think it was one of their PTs. I think the PT I had started seeing was gone and they're like, oh, just go over there. They have the nicest gym I have ever seen. That's only for them. They had cold plunge and hot tubs. They had a sports medicine doctor, a PT, an athletic trainer. And I was like, how many people are in this squadron? And they're like, oh, like 60 something. I was just like, how do we make this happen for us? Like,
I will be every day in the cold plunge.
Yeah.
Like, this is, does no one know this is over here? Can I come by more often?
They're like, don't say a word.
No, exactly. They're like, no.
Are you into cold plunges?
I am not, but I feel like you can only resist for so long before someone's just like, this is what we do now. And they just stick you in a cold plunge because the whole world is cold plunging.
It's the new rage.
If I had one available to me, like I'd probably, like when I had one in Colorado, I live over in the Netherlands now, Michelle.
Oh, nice.
But I used to have just a trough that I kept outside, and I would just get in that in the winter and
break the ice.
It was awesome. Yeah, just break the ice and get in. It was awesome. When you talk about having to like maintain it and like actually put it together an actual working system, I just it's not that good,
I'm not sure how it would work. I mean, people obviously have them, but like my social media is just inundated with people. Cold plunge. Like that's like the whole feed. Living in Vegas where it's just so hot for so long and it doesn't even cool down at night as we get later in the summer, I feel like it would be quite the logistical lift and energy demand to keep it cold.
Yeah, it'd have to be stored indoors in a climate controlled building.
Yeah, I don't got space for that.
Most people don't.
Yeah, it turns out. I'm gonna need a new house if that's the case.
Well, that's why my buddy started, actually I have the hat right here. Shout out to Shannon Daniels with Tribe Cold Plunge. He's a former EOD guy, but yeah, it's like all the rage now until he treats it like a gym where he actually has a gym in the back, but he has a sauna and ice bath where you pay a monthly membership or you get a certain number of dips and you just go over there after your workout, like on your way home, and do a couple combinations of sauna and ice bath and head home.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's better than paying $5,000 for some of those high-end ones with all the filters and fancy side. Yet again, another great rabbit hole we just went down.
Yeah, cold plunge.
Yeah, cold plunge. Go do it. So as you decided to get out of the military, a lot of people, they have a pretty definitive plan of, I'm going to go work for this company, Amazon or some other big name. You decided immediately to go down the entrepreneurship path. Did you have any entrepreneurial experience? Did you have mentor support, or you're just like, I'll figure it out how to fly an F-16. I can figure out how to do public speaking.
Mostly the latter. I did consider some other options. So before I got asked to stay on the Thunderbirds for a third year, I already knew I was probably going to get out at that point. And I was like, oh, I'll go fly for the airlines. That's what all my friends do. It pays decent. The schedule's pretty good once you get seniority. I was like, I live in Vegas, so I'll, try to apply for Southwest and go do that. Then the pandemic happens Now my timeline gets shifted a year later. And there's also this period of uncertainty with the airlines, right? Where everyone's getting furloughed. No one knows what's going to happen. So I was like, okay, let's pretend the airlines are not an option. Because that job didn't get me excited. It was just like what made sense. I was like, what would I want to go do? And so that's when I started to explore like just different options. I talked to a tech startup that does drones in the defense space for a while, and they're just crushing it. Met their team, did some interviews. And I kind of realized that coming off of being on the road for 240 days a year, being in a very controlled environment where you are told exactly how you're going to be used, you're given exactly the talking points that you will say, you guys know, like your uniform's got to be specific. I just wanted some more autonomy. Like I was just hungry to have creative control of my narrative, because like in the Thunderbirds, my personal story had become all wrapped up in this Thunderbird brand and how I was presenting myself online to the public. And so my entire life narrative, everything from like working out and having a stepson and meeting my husband and my hobbies and all of that, is like public consumption mixed in with being a Thunderbird pilot. And that ended up setting me up for what I am doing now, which wasn't the intention at the time. But it also felt like I had to filter my entire life through the Air Force's narrative. And I had started to get asked to do speaking events while I was still on active duty, and I couldn't do them then. Conflict of interest, my schedule didn't allow either. And I would say maybe 6 months prior to leaving active duty, thinking I would possibly go work for this tech company, I had a speaking request come in that was far enough out in the future that it was after I was leaving. I had no idea what speakers got paid. So I started to like ask around in that, and I was like, oh, really? Like that's wait a minute. And so I ended up booking them for more money than I made in a month as a pilot in the Air Force. And I was just like, I need to get ready for this speech, because I do not want to feel like I just screwed someone over and they paid all that money I didn't deliver. So it was like pressure's on. Already sold this thing that doesn't exist yet. But also I was like, wait, I could be a speaker, have control of my narrative, use this story to inspire and impact people in a positive way. I had, wanted to write a kid's book. I had actually written a manuscript during the pandemic, wanted to figure out how to take that across the finish line. Like there were all these creative things I wanted to do. I'd really loved being a content creator just through the Thunderbirds and my Instagram account. Like that had become very fun for me, and connecting with all of those people. And so I think I went to my husband and I was like, I think I'm going to tell this tech company that I'm going to start my own thing. And he was just like, okay, like whatever you think you need to do. Meanwhile, like as my terminal leave is wrapping up, I go to this speaking school, like 2-day course, and the upsell is an 8-month long graduate level speaking program. It's like $25,000. And I'm there texting my husband. I'm like, I need to sign up for this. And he's like, you're getting your last active duty paycheck in like 2 weeks. Are you sure? Like, that's a lot of money. I ended up signing up for it, and it's more than paid for itself at this point. And that was because if I'm like, I'm going to do this, like I would pay money for a master's degree if I was going to go do something that I needed that for. So I just tried to think of it the same way. Like if people are going to pay money for me, they're going to invest their resources, they're going to invest their people's time, I'm going to put my name and what has become like a brand behind it. I want it to be really freaking good. Like I'm not going to get up on stage and be like, oh look, cool jet video, questions. Like I need a story, I need a message, I need to connect with my audience, take them on an emotional journey. I need them to be like raving about how incredible it was. And so I just jumped into it head first. There is a handful of other fighter pilots in the speaking space who I talked to. Little pieces of helpful information here and there, but I didn't have anyone that was super involved in my decisions. It was very much just me figuring it out as I go, not knowing what I didn't know, being like, what quarterly taxes? What is this crap? Like QuickBooks and LLC registration. And like, it was so much just figuring it out as I went.
Yeah, that was the exact journey I had when I had the conversation with my wife. I was working as a recruiter at the time. tech recruiter, not in the military. And the way our commission structure was set up is it reset at the end of the year, and I'd close out all my deals. My commission was going to get reset. I didn't have a whole lot in the hopper. So like, I'm going to be, and we had COVID at the time. So we're sitting around OG COVID 2020.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can either go back to my company getting my commission down to, it was like 12.5 to 25%, depending if you close one or both halves of the deal. Or I can start in the same spot, which is pretty much square one, and make full commission. And with recruiting, it was one of those things where it's like real estate. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to figure it out. It's more of, do you have a little give a fuck and some work ethic? And so I decided to go off on my own. And it was the same thing of, all right, let's figure out what I need to do to start a business. What's the bare minimum? In the span of a week, I created a logo off Google and PowerPoint. I opened a free Gmail account.
Yep.
I used a free LinkedIn page. I didn't have a website for, I think, a year and a half. I was like, there's no point in this. The only thing I really paid for was the LinkedIn recruiter subscription, and everything else was just, I'll just start reaching out to people and
which
making
is
it work.
Super expensive.
It's very expensive. LinkedIn has a monopoly on that area. It's like $8,000 a year per user. Dang. Yeah, that is a significant investment, but at the same time, when you're closing deals, it could be $25,000, $30,000. Right. One deal gets it. So and they know that. That's why it's so expensive. And so yeah, you work through it, and that's what really inspired the whole Vet Collective thing that we started. Was I went through all these struggles to figure out what needed to happen to start a business. Let me just put that into a checklist or a process that people can follow, regardless of what industry you're getting into. A lot of the stuff remains the same, but every day has been so much more fun being an entrepreneur than working for somebody else, because you're problem solving. The problems are yours. You get to be creative. You can direct. I mean, there's stress. I brought in a bunch of credit card debt at the beginning, but you work through it, because it's debt that you're putting towards getting something that's going to eventually pay for itself, versus just dropping money on new cars, new clothes, new expensive houses that are going to become a liability. It was building something that I was going to be able to use for perpetuity.
It's so fulfilling, and it is stressful. It's a roller coaster, I would say, like the highest highs and then like the moments of panic. But I love that the responsibility all falls on me. Like that autonomy and that ownership that you get to have, I've just found to be so rewarding. And it's such a freeing feeling to not have Big Brother looking over your shoulder and not have anyone else's expectations that you're trying to meet. Like, of course, I want to deliver for my clients, but big picture for the business, I get to decide as it evolves and as it pivots and the narrative. And I love it. Like, it's challenging. I could probably make more money working for a tech sales company, but
for sure.
I love it.
And what is the main thesis of the talk that you give? I've spoken to a few people that are on the speaking circuit, and they typically have 1 to 3 different talks they give depending on the audience.
So I have honestly one main one that I do 99% of the time, and it's called Flying Through Fear: How Vulnerability Fuels Success. What it's really about is taking this shiny finished product of being a Thunderbird pilot, pulling back the curtain and giving the contrast to the audience of seeing that high performance, seeing those videos. Like, I have just some amazing footage from the cockpit, which really, puts the audience in position and gives them that perspective, even if they've never seen an air show. And then talking about being shy and being reserved and struggling with my identity and imposter syndrome and self-doubt, and, working so hard towards a goal and then getting there and thinking that I would quit if I could, but I had a contract with the Air Force. And then like the whole evolution of how I was able to dig out of that hole of just feeling like I was at the lowest point in my life, despite from the outside looking like I was just killing it, to actually feel like I was happy and content and excited to do all these things. And what I get told again and again by audiences is that they feel like it was written just for them. Like, they feel like it was the thing that they needed to hear that day, that it was like the most inspiring speech they've had. The connection with the audience was how I built the entire thing. I was like, my goal is not to go up here and like list, 5 steps for a high performing team or something like that. It is to tell stories and to take people from laughing to crying to feeling like they can go tackle things that just felt impossible before. And it is just so incredibly rewarding to do it in that way. And the number of people that have followed up with me after a speech months later, I had a guy recently that was like, hey, I saw you speak last year. And he was at a different event and saw me speak again. And he's like, you pushed me to start my PhD. And so he's like getting his PhD. He's like 50 years old and he's getting his PhD now. People have started businesses. Awesome. People have asked for promotions at work or put their name in the hat for him and got them, even though they didn't think that they were competitive. And people have started books and started speaking themselves. And to just feel like I get to be a little bit of a catalyst to push people to go do something they already wanted to do, but they didn't quite believe in themselves enough to have the courage to actually take the first step is so cool. It is so rewarding, and it can be applied to any audience because it's a universal human struggle. I knew when I was going to talk about self-doubt and imposter syndrome that women in male-dominated careers would for sure relate with me, or people that were new to a really challenging career would relate with me. What's really been eye-opening to me over the last 2 years are the number of high-achieving, high-level leaders in very established and in some cases well-known companies who will come up afterwards and be like, that was so, like, I have felt that way my entire career. I am the VP of whatever at Fortune 500 company and everyone looks to me for the answers, but I struggle with that exact thing all the time. And it's really made me realize that no matter what your title is or what letters you have behind your name or what your office looks like, we are all just people and we all have those moments of doubt. We all need that support from time to time. And when you realize that, it just makes what feels like is possible so much bigger in the world because you don't have this idea that, oh, I am this person with this background and I can only do this thing. All of a sudden you're like, wait, I can learn and grow and push through uncomfortable things and go do anything. Like I can evolve as a person if I want to. I have to put in the work, but it's actually possible. And it's just so cool to be able to do that for people.
That's truly.
I'm already ready to. I'm ready to Kool-Aid man this one through a wall. Yeah, let's go.
Where do you typically give your talks? With corporate events? Do you have? Is it more of like an open to the public type thing? Where do you do these speeches?
Most are for private corporate events, like a sales kickoff thing, a leadership conference. Occasionally, I'll have conferences that are open to the public, as in they could like buy a ticket and attend, a conference or an event. I always share that on my social media if that's the case. I'll do a few schools every year. Some stuff's like STEM-based organizations or somehow flight focused, like a flight museum or something like that. So those are some of the stuff we do that's like more pro bono or reduced rate. But the bulk is corporate audiences.
Mm-hmm. And I saw you you wrote a second book, so you have 2 children's books now.
Yes.
Walk us through how you got that published. I know a lot of people have that idea of being an author and getting it published, and there's a whole bunch of different options out there. Which path did you take?
Totally. So, I came up with the idea of writing a children's book about a little girl that wants to be a fighter pilot my first year on the Thunderbirds because of all the reasons I mentioned. Like, I could just see how impactful it was for little girls. I was like, wait, I want them to see a character that they can relate to having this big dream. And so I wrote the manuscript during the pandemic when a bunch of air shows canceled and I had a little bit of spare time. And I had no idea how that world worked. And so I go on Publishers Marketplace and I'm like, top children's literary agents. And I make a list of like 15. I submit queries to all of them. They have no idea who the Thunderbirds are. Most of them, I would say. They like are in their own, author literary agent bubble that's not related to the military. And they're like, yeah, I don't know you from Adam. Like, no, thanks. So I get all these no's or just no responses. And I'm like, okay, this is different than I expected, but all right, this is like, I'm learning.
I thought it was
here.
A lot cooler.
Yeah, it's like, I thought someone would at least like want to get on a phone call. No, nothing. Okay, cool. So then air shows start back up. I get super busy, it gets put on the back burner. I'm at the point where I'm leaving active duty and about to transition into speaking. I start using LinkedIn because I had a profile on there that I wasn't doing anything with. Right as my terminal leave is ending, I update it. I start posting like every single day. I'm like, this is a gold mine for people that hire speakers, right? Like business leaders are on here. They're not on Instagram, they're here. So I start to grow this following there. This woman reaches out who's a ghostwriter, and she was like, hey, would you be interested in writing like a memoir or some other type of like long form book? And I was like, no, not right now, but I have a 700 word children's book manuscript with no illustrator. Got any ideas? Turns out she was also a children's author, and she had published all of her books with this small publisher called Endgame Press. And she connected me with them, and within a week we had done paperwork and it was moving forward. And they paired me with an illustrator who was amazing. The book came out, the first one, Upside Down Dreams, came out last year. Did really well. The contract's for 3 books. The second one, What's Your Call Sign, just came out less than a month ago. And then there'll be a third one next year. And I do like working with a traditional publisher just because they have such a process built out, and having that support of having an editor and an illustrator in this case, and distribution and all that stuff has been very helpful when it's not my primary thing and I have so much going on with the speaking stuff that I'm just really busy and I don't have a ton of bandwidth to dedicate to it. But there have been a lot of people that have self-published and done really well as well. You just have to be a little bit more hands-on to figure it out as you go and to manage the whole process.
And now the elephant in the room question: How did you get your call sign?
Yeah, that's what I was like. We got to ask. We got to ask before we get.
I know there's always good stories behind it.
Yeah, so you probably also know that in the Air Force, the tradition is you only tell people the full story over a beverage in person. I think
he just drank some water
to get free beer. And so
sure.
Obviously I do a lot of podcasts and stuff, so I always give like the Cliff Notes version and leave a little bit of mystery. I tell the whole story in vivid detail during my keynotes.
Only 10% of it needs to be true.
No, we have the same rule, so perfect. No, but call signs are based on something dumb you did generally. Like people think they sound cool. Top Gun has really failed us in not giving a background to call signs or not giving like any story to their main character's call sign. Because they just sound cool and people just accept that that's what they're called. But you do not get any say in it. And actually, if you push back, that's probably what you're going to get named. Or if you have something you want to be called, that is absolutely not what you're going to be called. And it's kind of this like rite of passage in your first combat unit after you've gone through mission qualification training. So you are certified that you could now be a combat wingman, like you could deploy the next day and go do that. So it's kind of this celebration of like welcome to the community officially. But also going through that MQT gives you like 3 or 4 months of flying a lot and just messing stuff up left and right. So they have a lot of fodder to use to name you. So mine, MACE, is an acronym. The internet is speculating on what it stands for, so I'm not going to tell you exactly what it stands for, but basically one of my very first flights in Japan, dogfighting, I went supersonic when I shouldn't have. And then I pulled a ton of G's because I was going so fast.
I feel like this is a line from Top Gun. Went supersonic when I shouldn't have, pulled a bunch of G's.
Probably. And then
went below the hard deck.
Inverted for -4G dive.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I pulled a ton of G's. I almost G-locked. So it was actually like a really bad experience. Like it could have had catastrophic results. It really shook my confidence as well because it was my first time in the aircraft experiencing something that actually felt dangerous. So it was like this eye-opening, like I had this idea that this job was dangerous, but now I'm like acutely aware of how quickly that can happen. I'm sure you guys have had that experience too. Like you imagine it in your head. You're like, yeah, I'm accepting that. And then something happens where you're like, holy shit, I almost just died. And
Helicopters.
You're like, now it's reality. My husband hates helicopters as well.
Helicopters are terrifying.
So that was kind of the thing that started me down into that self-doubt and being like, I'm in the wrong career field. I'm not good enough to be here, all the things. But I'll let people speculate about what the acronym stands for. But basically, broke the Mach when I shouldn't have, supersonic, pulled 9 Gs for a really long time, almost G-locked. All that sounds cool, but it sucked. at the time.
Do you have a favorite fan theory that is like totally way off?
Someone is going around on like multiple platforms and commenting on anytime I bring up my call sign, people will be like, but wait, what does it stand for? And someone's saying made a critical error. Like they're like, MACE stands for made a critical error. And this guy will go in the comments and respond to everyone and tell them that. And I'm just like, hi, who are you? And like, what? Good idea, but you're wrong.
I love the people that attach themselves to your social media and they comment on everything. Like some of them are great, that you have conversations with them, and some of them are just coming off the deep end. You're like, what are you talking about?
Yes.
I wonder if our guy is still listening to us, Kevin.
What was his name?
Raymond Bencoxy.
Raymond.
Yeah, you have a super fan? We call those guys super
fans.
Oh
my god.
Yes, he's a super emails fan. Every day. Emails and messages every day. Yeah. I don't typically block people, but I had to because it was literally just like dumping stuff in.
Yeah. It's one of my challenges has been to like where to draw boundaries with people. Like you get the real weird people where it's very obvious I'm not going to engage with them. But you get like the middle of the road people who have like legit like problems and they like want advice and you feel compelled like you should help them. And then they just keep messaging you and keep emailing you. And it's like a novel every time. And you're like, this stresses me out. I don't have the time to talk to you more than I talk to my husband. Like, I don't know why I've become your person, but I can't be your person and the person for 100,000 other people. So yeah, I get those as well.
And you've done remarkably well on LinkedIn. You got the cool blue badge, top voice.
Yeah, it just pops
if
up.
You
I
didn't
don't know.
start. That's what John McCaskill said. He's like, I don't know, it just showed up one day.
Yep.
Like there's no email letting them know it happened. They didn't explain why it happened. There's like,
yep. You just like
you're a top voice.
The threshold at some point and become a top voice, I guess.
But they're all over the place because he didn't get his until he was like 70 something thousand.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then he just broke 100,000 recently. Not that 27,000 that you have is any small number, but like, there's huge disparity between that. So it's not a follower threshold.
Yeah.
There must be some kind of engagement percentage or something in there that it's just, it triggers it off. But, going from, you said that you didn't even start using LinkedIn until the very tail end of your career. And now 27,000, like whatever you're putting out there, the daily content is resonating with the audience.
Yeah, basically in 2 years, I've built it to what it is now. And I wouldn't say it purely comes down to this, but I've consistently posted 5 days a week for 2 years without missing any, which at times feels like you're just running towards the horizon. And it's just like this burden because you have to feed the monsters every day.
I can't miss it.
You can't miss it, even though they wouldn't even notice. The algorithm would notice. So actually last fall, I hired a copywriter to help me do it because I was just like, it was just this extra stressor all the time. And so he, at that point, already had over a year of content that I had written. So it was very easy for him to pick up my voice, to repurpose things. Mm-hmm. And so we play around a little bit with the structure, but every single post, we want to make sure it brings some sort of value. So it's just like, it's quality and then just consistency, I think, is the biggest thing.
Yeah. The consistency is huge. Mm-hmm. The way the algorithm works where, as people engage with it, your stuff now pops up on their feed more often. The more they engage with it, the higher up on the feed it is. And so you'll get people that'll just routinely engage with your stuff, which drives the algorithm to spread it farther. And so if you don't write consistently, you don't get that the momentum effect that goes through with it, which a lot of people don't understand. Like you don't have to have a perfect post every time. Yeah. Obviously don't put out garbage because that's just a waste of everybody's time. But I think it's 1%. Sorry, 1%.
Kevin.
I know my dog's excited. He's just a happy guy.
Did you say his name is Kevin? Oh,
no, my name's Kevin.
Did you name your dog Kevin as well?
Yeah.
I thought you were like Kevin.
I love
like,
naming
animals,
like, human names though. Weird. Like our cat's name is Bruce.
I like that.
I like that.
That's you named your dog after you. I was like Kevin Jr. Anyway, sorry.
I think Kristen actually suggested that we called our newer dog Kevin. She thought it was hilarious. I'm like, no, because that's going to be confusing as hell for me. She would have fun with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
back to the LinkedIn stuff. I think it's like 1% of people on LinkedIn actually create new original content. So
yeah,
just by creating something, you're already putting yourself far and beyond what everyone else on there. So you can create a name for yourself if you have something worth saying and you have a purpose behind the content, which obviously you have in spades.
it is so much easier to gain traction on LinkedIn than other social media platforms, right? Like Instagram was what I grew with on the Thunderbirds because I was just posting cool jet videos. Like substance wasn't really required. It is, right? And so now it's actually, I've kind of gone through this evolution. It was like build this audience with cool jet videos behind the scenes. People haven't seen this before. They love it. It's growing like crazy. And then I'm leaving the Thunderbirds. Like I can't just keep posting cool jet videos. Like that gets weird if that's like all I do. And so now I like pivot to this like thought leadership type stuff on LinkedIn. But now that's taking all my focus. So the only thing I can give to Instagram is just a carbon copy of my LinkedIn content that I just scheduled to post on both. And people on Instagram are like, what is this shit that makes me think about my life? Some people
this isn't
like
what
really
I signed up
engage
for.
with it.
Yeah, I'm here
some
for
people love
fucking
it.
jets.
They're like, this is so motivational, whatever. But then the people that just want mindless cool jet content are like, what the hell? And now it's kind of coming back around. Like I'm still doing that on LinkedIn. I'm still posting that on Instagram, but I'm also starting to do some of just like what I see as dumb short videos on Instagram that are like, I just did one last week. I was at Nellis for patch night, like our equivalent of Top Gun, their graduation. It's a big party. And I went out on the flight line and one of the Texas tails, F-16s with a Texas tail, has now been given to a unit at Nellis. And it's like one of the jets I flew in combat. It's just parked out there on the ramp. And so I just took a video of the jet. It's like 10 seconds long. And it's like when you're out for the night and see your ex and she looks real good. And people loved it. They went crazy for it. And I was like, I guess this is the bar I need to set for this platform.
Instagram is not a high bar. I tell Greg all the time, like, I think I've deleted it off my phone about a dozen times because every time I bring it back, I'm like, nope, this one's going to be different. I'm going to be productive on here. I'm going to be using it for business. And it turns into a doom scroll. Like anytime I sit down, pick up my phone.
Yeah.
It's just that
the algorithm.
mindless.
The algorithm is so good. It's so good. It just gets me.
Mindless pick up my phone because I have nothing happening right now. Mm-hmm. And if something like Instagram is on there, then I have something to do to scroll through.
Yep.
And then yes, the algorithm on there knows exactly what I want to see, and I'll just scroll and scroll and scroll. Like, God, I need to stop.
I struggle with that as well because I do still see it as like building part of my business. It becomes a big player if you're looking at like brand partnerships or any of that kind of stuff. And sometimes those go hand in hand with keynote speeches and like there's a whole infrastructure there. So it is important to me to continue to build that platform. And I also connect with a lot of great people there, but I will find myself like, I picked up my phone for something else. I saw it a notification. I go look at it. Now 20 minutes has gone by and I'm like, it got me
dopamine
again.
dump. Dopamine dump.
Damn it.
Yeah, it's the devil. Plus the people, not the people on there. I'm going to get off Instagram because I will go off on a rant for a long time. Not get off at the topic. I can't deal with it. It knows me too well. Science is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's creepy how much it has like taken a hold. I mean, not just Instagram, TikTok, all of them taken a hold on society and like kids and how they experience the world and how we experience the world and our attention spans and all this stuff. But it's so hard to pull yourself away from.
Yeah. But with that, we like to ask our guests at the end, the name of the show is Harder Not Smarter. We talk about there's some things in life that you just need to grit through, have perseverance. I'm sure that you experience plenty of that within the fighter community and the Thunderbirds community. What's something you do regularly to keep that edge? I had a commander talk to us at the end of Hell Week, say, do one thing every day that challenges you so you don't become complacent.
Yeah, and that's been something that I've seen evolve since I left active duty, right? Like when I was on active duty, I just had such a rigorous schedule that if I wanted to go to the gym, I would have to be up at 5 a.m. and go do it then. Like that was the time to do it. So that just became normal. Now that when I'm not on the road, I work from my home office. it is definitely easy to find yourself like lulled into complacency. I try to remind myself it doesn't have to look the same as it did then. But I think through my active duty career and still now, like physical fitness and working out has been this cornerstone that I can control, and that sets me up to be healthy and have the energy to run the crazy schedule that I run, but that also makes me feel strong and disciplined. And when I consistently stick with that, it just percolates into all parts of my life. And so I regularly will push people, even if they're not like gym people or fitness people, to just, even if it's like, I will go walk 4 times a week for 45 minutes, just something that's like what you're going to do, how long you're going to do for, and what you want the result to be. And like bring in that into your schedule in a disciplined way, because that sets the tone for how you do everything else.
That's so true. If you're not physically active, your mental health and your focus is just going to quickly disappear, and it's going to be very difficult to get it back.
For sure. And yeah, I think maybe it's cold plunge. Maybe that needs to be the new thing.
It's coming in. If there's anybody out there in the cold plunge industry, I'm sure you can get Michelle to drop a good Instagram video of her cold plunging daily now. Maybe even having her jet in the background.
Yeah, there we go.
Photoshop is a magical thing these days, so we can make
there
anything
it is.
happen.
A sense of sponsorship coming in the fucher.
Right? Yeah. Cold plunge in 110 degrees in Vegas. I mean, I would be open to a conversation.
You hear it here first, guys.
Yeah. Well, Michelle, thank you so much. It was so much fun hearing your story, getting to know more about you, and really what drove you to hit the level that you did.
For sure. This has been such a fun podcast. I do a lot of them, yes. And most have, very structured questions where sometimes you answer and then the host doesn't even really react to what you just said. They just read the next question.
Just the next question. Yeah.
And this was, I just felt like you said, like we're just hanging out around a campfire or having a beer. It was really fun to talk with both of you. This is good.
Nice. Well, this is
awesome.
Definitely going to be pulled off as a clip and put someplace.
Right.
Yeah.
We love these things. No, that's exactly the feel we're going for. So I'm glad we're hitting the mark.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.